Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to convene this meeting. Good morning of the full committee of the Ways and Means. We have an ambitious agenda that has to conclude before 9 o'clock for everybody to get to rules. These are those times of the session that scare me the most, where we seem to have to do things in a hurry. But we're trying to accommodate everybody, and I know people have worked hard to get to this point, so I don't want anybody to feel left out of the process. We have before the committee this morning House Bill 230, I think, out of Public Finance. Is Chairman Scott here?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question before we do that?
Sure.
We have over 150 bills on consideration calendar. We were told Tuesday was the last day. We have over 200 bills here. Why are we taking over two-thirds of these people do not have their bills considered on the House floor by the time day 30? Why are we considering yet 5 more on House floor?
Actually, 4 more House bills and 2 resolutions. The only real answer I had to that is try to accommodate the people that have worked so hard on it and give them a chance for a supplemental calendar or whatever if their bills are considered of a priority nature that will best serve the people we all represent. That's all. I don't ever want anybody to think the process is eliminating anybody from doing what's the best thing for the people they represent. So we're doing this. Yes.
That also gives them a chance for them to consider making their way back if there's a Senate bill they can move to a solution.
Okay. Well, I don't see my public finance chairperson, so yeah, if you would.
230.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I thought I saw Austin a minute ago. Guess not. Mr. Chairman, the Chairman Scott's subcommittee met on House Bill 230 yesterday morning. They forwarded it to full committee with a do pass recommendation.
Chair recognizes Representative Bruce to very briefly explain his bill to the committee, please, if you could.
I will be very brief. This bill is just designed to help. First of all, say good morning.
Good morning.
But it's designed to help parents who have school-age children to be able to have time off to attend an activity at their child's school without their job being put at risk. I know those that were not on the subcommittee probably not very why this is in this committee. It got shifted to this committee because at one point people wanted to try to make it into a tax credit if businesses complied with it. And as time went on, it just evolved into something different. And that's why it's here. But that's all the bill does. It seeks to help parents as they spend time at school up to 8 hours per year without their job being put at risk.
Gentlemen, you are for questions, members of the committee. Any member of the committee have a question for Representative Bruce? Chair recognizes Representative Flood.
Good morning, Representative Bruce. I appreciate you bringing this legislation. As you know, I'm a parent, and I do agree that involvement in schools is important. I'm also a business person and have a few employees that work with me, and I understand that this bill doesn't require that I do or create any additional days for them. It simply allows for a day that might already be available to be used for up to 8 hours of involvement at the school per year.
It does not create additional days.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Chairman O'Neill. Is there a reason this isn't an urging resolution versus a House bill?
Simply as we all know, when things come out as a resolution, probably 2 or 3 days later, nobody even remembers when you passed the resolution. We're just trying to get something that would show as policy of the state that would have some power to last.
Chair Representative Roberts.
Representative Bruce, I mean, I do applaud you for the bill, but I mean, as Chairman Brown said, I mean, are we just basically just trying to put in the law a resolution telling businesses that they should do this?
I mean, as it reads, what we're trying to do is make sure that it becomes a policy of the state that businesses consider doing this without putting
Any further questions? Yes, ma'am.
Question for Mr. Bruce, and I have been to discussion. We heard testimony from the Chamber of Commerce that they were comfortable with this language. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
And I think that's part of what took us to such a late time in the session, was seeking to get something that would work for all the parties that were bringing testimony. Is that right?
Actually, I think I recall the testimony was not only they were okay with it, they actually were willing now to support it.
That is correct.
And make sure that it gets proper attention statewide, because it does say what I think we all believe, that all of us as parents are encouraged to participate in our child's education, and that includes parent-teacher conferences and all the things that go with that. It imposes absolutely no legal obligation whatsoever on small business, medium business, or big business. It came out imposing such an obligation, potentially.
That's correct.
And now that's probably the biggest reason it's still a matter of a bill as opposed to a resolution. It's essentially been reduced to stating as our policy, like is with No Child Left Behind, that we do believe as a state we should be involved in our children's education.
That's correct.
And some, especially single parents, aren't able to do that in many cases if there's not an awareness in the employment area. And this does that. And I laud the author of the bill for bringing it. Is there any other questions for the author? Any member of the committee wish to be heard on the merits of the bill? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the proposition, House Bill 230, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
No.
All right, we're going to need a hand count. All those in favor, raise your hand. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, Michelle. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure carries 10-4. Chairman Richard Royal, do you have a report to the full committee on House Bill 1281? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair recognizes Chairman Bob Smith to present House Bill 1281 to the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I want to thank Chairman Royal and Representative Martin and the Legislative Council for helping with this proposal. This is a taxpayers' Bill of Rights issue where we're looking at the backdoor tax increase that we passed, a bill that we passed about 7 years ago. And what this bill will do is it will tell the voters and the taxpayers particularly that we're paying attention to them relating to backdoor tax increases. In some municipalities and counties, they're advertising a certain millage rate, and then after the public hearings are held, they go to the taxing authority and get them to up the dollars that they need, maybe a raise in millage rate. And this is not fair to our taxpayers that go to the public hearings that expect a certain millage rate and a certain tax increase. What this bill will do is force will tell the county commission, the taxing authorities to place an ad in the paper, 30 square inches, 5 inches by 6 inches, and then this will say that this is a tax increase, that a $100,000 property has a certain increase in tax, and also there's an option as to whether the taxing authority can say why they're raising the taxes. And more particularly, the last section on page 4, line 25 through 31, this gives the Commissioner of Revenue a hammer to stop some of these shenanigans that are going on in the counties there, that says if you do not play by the rules, then we can force you, and we catch you, then we can force you to pay back those tax increases that you have charged these taxpayers above the dollar amount that you had said during the public hearings. And that, Mr. Chairman, is a summary of the bill.
Okay, well, the gentleman yield for questions. As I recall, too, in the subcommittee testimony, that bill had the support of the County Commissioners Association in their statement that they were always in favor of transparent government at the association level. Wasn't that true?
That is my understanding, too, sir.
Questions for the author? Hearing none, does any member of the committee have any comments on the legislation? Chair recognizes Representative Martin for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we do pass HB 1281 LC 1854 84F. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Chairman Smith. Chairman Smith.
Chairman Royal, do you have a report to the full committee on House Resolution 1634 by Representative Scheid? Chair recognizes Representative Scheid to present his resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I'd like to thank the Chairman Royal for this. House Resolution 1634 is a constitutional amendment that allows House Resolution 1634 is a constitutional amendment that would allow counties or cities to hold their own referendum in order to allow the voters to remove the ad valorem ad valorem inventory tax on retail stores or in the furniture business. This puts that authority at the local level, and ad valorem inventory tax is something that state Southeast Georgia is the only one that's still doing an ad valorem inventory tax. We thought that by leaving this up to the local counties or cities to do this would be the best way to approach the elimination of it.
Okay, will the gentleman yield for questions? Chairman Brown.
Representative Scheid, why limit it to furniture?
Chairman Brown, that's a good question. Came up even in the subcommittee. We started out with a process to eliminate the ad valorem inventory tax throughout the state. Ran into different obstacles on doing that, but we found that had a study committee last year. We had 3 meetings, one in Columbus, one in Savannah, one in Atlanta. The majority of the folks that were showing up were the retail furniture businesses, and this inventory tax was a real burden on them. We thought we would take this step now and allow this to be at a county level and part of the retail business, furniture retail business. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Chairman Scott.
Does this have to be done by constitutional amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so now if we want to come back and as Representative Brown, Chairman Brown suggested, this is for furniture. If we have another industry that we want to do the same thing for, then we're going to have another constitutional amendment. And I mean, I'm hesitant to pass a tremendous amount of constitutional amendments. I mean, I think the Constitution should be reserved for a very limited spectrum of things. But again, why just the furniture industry? Why not people in the lawn and garden business that have a lot of lawnmowers? Why not jewelry? Why not, appliance dealers?
To be honest, Mr. Chairman, when we did the hearings, as I said, the majority of the businesses that we did hear from were in the retail. And if you'll notice the other sponsors on this resolution, we do have some major retail outlets in Georgia and other districts. So, you want to speak to this at all? Can I ask?
If I may, I think my point is that once we do this one, we're going to end up with another constitutional amendment for every retail industry out there, potentially.
Okay, got that. Chair recognizes Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And keep in mind, if I may, isn't it true that we can just pass a bill that would not necessarily be a constitutional amendment? I think one's on the rules calendar today regarding watercraft. If we decide to target a specific industry outside of eliminating the inventory tax altogether, and that's the question.
Who's that question
It does not have to be a constitutional amendment or a vote. We can just do it as a legislative body. But by doing it this way, isn't it true? We allow the local taxing authorities to voluntarily do it themselves.
Correct.
Well, I'll answer that by cutting to the chase. It's about $200-something million of revenue to local governments is what it amounts to, and I think, and I'll let Representative Scheid speak his own mind in that regard, but I think you thought it was maybe a little bit too much to impose that much of a tax loss to our local governments who vitally need this to run their thing, instead of letting them have the choice. And this was just a beginning in the industry, as you said in subcommittee.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, we did have a bill, and it did have a fiscal impact, as the chairman said, of $270 million. That just was a great deal of hit for any local governments. This way, the local governments are allowed to have their own referendum, and in this way, we're targeting one industry to begin this. I know that I think it's chairman of the Ways and Means has a separate bill to do a study on our taxing system, and I'm in hopes that we'll see that the ad valorem inventory tax is something we don't need to state.
We have fond but yeah, Chairman recognizes Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Scheid, the retail furniture industry, you mentioned there were some complaints and some concerns. Can you itemize which industries have the highest ad valorem income, ad valorem taxes? Is retail furniture the highest, and what's the next highest, and what's the third? What are the top five?
That is a good question, and we found through the study committee that we had in the three cities that yes, the retail furniture industry was the ones that had the highest. They are the ones that are impacted most by this through. Usually, it's the fourth quarter of the year where they're having the largest sales that they have, and most of them are hesitant to even bring in more inventory because they get stuck with a high tax at the year end.
What falls after retail furniture?
Representative Flood, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Thank you.
Further questions? Comments from members of the committee about the legislation? I can't see behind me, so y'all have to speak up if anybody.
Again, I think the concern is that this, since we're giving municipalities the option to do this or option to not do it, that based on the retail makeup of the municipality, one municipality might want art dealers to be able to do this, others might want jewelers, others might want. Would you at any point through the process, whether it's here, the floor, consider broadening it so that a municipality could allow, or at least would have the option to extend this to more than just furniture? Since we're not mandating it from the legislature, it's something they would opt themselves to do.
Yeah, I have no opposition to that, especially if it were done on the floor. I just didn't want to hold it up at this point.
Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, while it certainly is laudable to exempt local inventories from ad valorem taxes, we aren't dealing with state revenues here. We're dealing with local revenue. And this, depending on where these retail businesses might be located, if this resolution passes in November, and then if a county chooses to do so, their local revenue could take a tremendous hit. That's number one. And the thing about a resolution like this, which is fine, is that once a county does it, the other counties surrounding it just about have to. Otherwise, they're going to lose the option of locating a retail furniture business in their county. Once it's sort of like domino effect. Once the county does it, everyone around them are going to have to.
Mr. Chairman, if I can address that, it actually is allowing the local municipality, local city, local counties to hold their own referendum and it's the voters that would decide that. So I think that's the best way to let the local folks decide these things. Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Cummings.
Yes, it would. And again, that's at the local level that they would be deciding that referendum. Representative Cummings, it doesn't mean that the referendum would necessarily pass at the local level, but it gives the citizens an opportunity to vote yes or no on the inventory tax. And I'm sure that the school systems would be making comments about the benefit to the schools if it did or did not pass.
Okay. I think everybody pretty much knows what the bill says. I really wish we were more early in the session because there could be a lot of refinement done to this. I'm rarely ever opposed to voter choice on any matter for that matter, but I don't want to make any comments that may taint how people vote one way or another. So what is the preference of the committee? We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the proposition signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? No. I'm going to have to see a hand count. The ayes, please.
Yeah.
9. 9 opposed. Nine to 8, it carries, I think. Let me get another count. All in favor? Opposed? Nine to 8, it does carry. Overwhelmingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Royal, do you have a report to the full committee on House Bill 1416 by Chairman Willard? Chair recognizes our Chairman of Judiciary, also the author of this legislation, Chairman Willard, to present his bill.
Please understand not having a quota is not lack of respect. It's forgetfulness. I left the coat hanging on the chair this morning. I left. The wife bring it down, so we'll hopefully have one before we start session. This bill is a bill that I'm carrying as a result of our other colleague, Representative Fran Miller, who had a heart attack, was going to be introducing this bill, and after his sudden illness, he called me and asked me to assist in our neighbors in the Dunwoody area, although my Dunwoody is Fulton County, his Dunwoody is DeKalb County. And I told Fran I would help him out with this matter. This is a bill, ladies and gentlemen, that is a result of a potential incorporation of a new city in the county of DeKalb, which is Dunwoody area. And the bill is being proposed as far as the incorporation from the Senate side, Senator Dan Weber, who is also present this morning with us. And this is in anticipation of the potential incorporation. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing is there's a host tax. DeKalb County is one of 2 counties that has a host tax. And the host tax is a type of tax that we look at other taxes, the loss tax in most counties, but host is in DeKalb and Rockdale County. They're the only 2 counties that have elected to proceed under the host tax option. It's a 1 cent tax, and the money is to reduce the taxes on residences in the county. Now, with that said, the bill was brought as a result of the potential incorporation. This will now neutralize what is the tax that is going to the county. Should there be an incorporation of Dunwoody, there would be a flow of the same amount of money that would come as a result into Dunwoody through the county tax. Now, by the incorporation, it will go from the county to the city of Dunwoody. And we had 2 hearings. Chairman Roy was kind enough to first hold a information hearing for us, at which time we received information of concerns about the bill. We've narrowed those provisions of the bill to be sure it only applies to the DeKalb County potential incorporation of Dunwoody. It does not have any application to Rockdale County. And we also try to address and have, I think, address concerns raised by the DeKalb County officials addressing the uncertainty about the revenue. We've had the formula in the bill perfected so that it is a what I call a neutral flow of the money. We've had the formula examined by persons at the Carl Vinson Institute, and they sent a letter which we addressed to the subcommittee yesterday regarding the fact that there is by their examination of the formula, a neutral flow of the money under the bill. And I say it's only in anticipation of the potential incorporation. Why is it important to pass? Because this will give some certainty to the people in Dunwoody what they may have to expect as far as the costs of their government and what they may have as revenue flows coming into the city. And so this is the reason we're asking for the legislation to go forward at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, yield for questions from members of the committee.
Yes, sir.
I have one, and I'll recognize the other members quickly. Could you, I guess, correlate this to what happened with Sandy Springs? Wasn't there a companion bill with Sandy Springs that dealt with what, in that case, I believe was a lost instead of a host tax? Could you?
It was, and it was House Bill 36, Mr. Chairman, and I was the author on that and sponsor on it. And what we were doing was, again, being sure that when you had the incorporation of Sandy Springs, the monies that were per capita to go to that area were then assigned as a payment from the Revenue Department directly to the city of Sandy Springs. And it based upon the percentages going to the county. It's a little different formula, but it was a percentage going to the county versus what was going to other cities, the other 9 cities in Fulton County. So we set up on a per capita basis. We allowed the city of Sandy Springs and Fulton County to negotiate. Failing to reach an agreement, this would be the fallback position, the formula in that bill. Yes, sir.
And this is very similar to that.
It is, yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, one of the questions that came up in something I still get some further clarification on was how this bill might treat the relationship between Dunwoody and the county and other cities in the county as it relates to the distribution of income.
There is now an agreement, a intergovernmental agreement between the other cities and DeKalb County addressing the division of funds for those cities. And, of course, Dunwoody will not be a part of that agreement unless it enters into it. Now, the legislation was drafted, again, with that provision put in last evening to be sure that it recognized this intergovernmental agreement and the legislation is not to affect that agreement. There is pending litigation because there's some concern about how that formula applies to the cities and from DeKalb County, but we want to be sure that this bill was narrowly drawn so it did not affect the existing agreement and the other cities' rights to their income.
Further question?
Follow-up?
Follow-up, yes.
Okay.
Does this mean that the treatment of Dunwoody is equal to the treatment of other cities? Or does it put Dunwoody?
Yes, sir. That is the intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you. Chairman Willard, has the DeKalb County Commission taken a position in this?
Well, I think there is a person here from DeKalb County. As far as the government as a body, I'm not sure if there's been a resolution. Has been a resolution. I think they're opposed to the incorporation, of course, of Dunwoody, and therefore I think they're opposed to anything dealing with the issue of the tax because they suspect there may be some loss of revenue to them. But as I say, we've tried to draft a formula that is neutralizing that question. But there's a philosophical difference, I think, the people in the Dunwoody area versus the DeKalb County government about the incorporation.
Thank you.
Representative Orrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it on? Now, Mr. Willard, you don't represent any of DeKalb County, do you?
No, ma'am, I do not.
And
this is a general bill, but I am. As I said, my disclaimer in the beginning was because of Representative Miller.
My fellow delegation member, that's
right.
In his illness. He was fortunate to draft you, I'd say.
I don't know.
my question,
on that.
my question is this not a bit premature in the process? I understand that the bill in the Senate that would move forward incorporation of Dunwoody, or taking that to the next step, has not moved, has not progressed out of committee.
It will be coming up Monday. And in response to that, I suggested it is important because of this, Representative Orog. It gives some certainty to the question of what will be the flow of monies for tax reasons into the new city of Dunwoody, so that when they go back and start looking at where monies may be allocated to come from and how that will then fit into a budget needs for the cost of operating the government. So that's why it is beneficial to have this passed at this time.
Well, further question, if I could, Mr. Chair. As a member of both the Fulton delegation and the DeKalb delegation, I recall a decade or more, and many around this table recall it, of looking at the issue of Sandy Springs. 2 decades, really, 2.5. Let's go for 25 years, and considerable attention paid, opportunities for community dialogue, community input, both from the formal governmental levels as well as the citizenry, because of course, as we all know, when you incorporate a city, it does impact the well-being and the status of all the surrounding areas, incorporated and unincorporated. And so I raised to you, in contrast to the 25 to 30 year discussion around the Sandy Springs, which ultimately led to creating a new general bill path to incorporate local municipalities. Does it not seem a bit premature that I don't believe this discussion is even 2 years in the making? I could be corrected on that, but isn't it the case that there's been very inadequate opportunity for a review of this matter in the county that's going to be terrifically
I think
effective?
living in the area that, as I have, North Fulton County, and just over the line, there's been talk for years about the potential of a city of Dunwoody. It wasn't realized the possibility of it being done, potential being done, of course, until Sandy Springs. I'm a very much proponent of cities and local government. I think it's just like the city of Atlanta is a great government. I think that Sandy Springs I love my city now. It started out, it's a great city, and the great interest of people in the public. I think there's a desire for people to have that local control. So it's not just blossomed overnight, but it has been years of discussion. We just didn't have the chance, we'll say, to incorporate cities.
Is it you usually get to answer with a musical background like we
that.
had this morning? The chair recognized Representative.
I thought that was,
yeah.
Is that scripted?
I was very impressed with the
I was
answer.
too.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's them escorting the chairman's wife in with his jacket.
Oh, okay.
That's the music we hear in the background, maybe. Excuse me. The author of the bill, isn't it true that what we're trying to do here is remove the revenue obstacle from the city of Dunwoody's creation? Whether or not that gets created will be handled with the Senate bill, but this allows, in general law, removes Dunwoody, if it becomes a city, from being penalized. Isn't that
Correct.
simply what we're trying to do with this,
it treats
this
it
bill?
on the same basis as the other cities which have the intergovernmental agreement.
Okay. Further questions for the presenter? Hearing none, any member of the committee wish to make a brief comment? We really need that door closed, if you could. Okay, thank you. Anybody wish to make a comment? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign?
No.
Okay, I'll need a hand count. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 11 to 4. Motion carries. Thank you. You made me.
Get down to other people's counties and start messing with that.
Do we have yet in our file House Bill 1254?
Don't y'all have some?
Chairman Lewis, do you have a report to the full committee on House Bill 1254?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, your income tax subcommittee met regarding House Bill 1254
yesterday and had a hearing only on it, and the fiscal note came in. We had a meeting this morning of the subcommittee consisting of myself, Representative Seltzer, Representative Martin Scott, Representative Chuck Martin, Representative Jameson, and Representative Cummings, and we gave it a do pass recommendation. It does have some substitute language, as I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chair recognizes Chairman Knox to present his bill, House Bill 1254.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I've just handed Chairman Lewis copies of the committee sub to address a concern about a tax deduction, or double dipping as we've called it, or a possibility of that under the bill as it was previously drafted. The committee agreed to that substitute, and the language is on page 2 of the substitute, and I've just handed copies to Chairman Lewis. I think we're having a conference at the moment. In any event, I'll explain the rest of the bill to the members of the committee. The bill essentially is a health savings account bill that allows individuals to provide for their own health care by using pre-tax dollars for a portion of their medical care, and then allows them to purchase what some folks call a catastrophic health insurance policy to cover those unforeseen, unexpected, large medical expenses that we might encounter where we're required to be in the hospital, have surgery, and that sort of thing. The difference is that currently we have some products like that in the state. There is a fiscal note that we have provided, and there are currently a product like that in the state already, and it's being sold around the country. It's being encouraged by both federal and state government. The Department of Insurance is interested in this bill and encouraged us to bring the bill forward. So it's not exactly a new idea. The difference between what we're doing now and what this bill will do is that it will allow the insurer to deduct the premium taxes that it pays on those products, namely the catastrophic portion of the product, and also allows the purchaser to deduct from their income taxes the amount that they are currently paying or will be paying for that catastrophic coverage, and that's the main difference in this. We're trying to incentivize this individual responsibility for individuals' health insurance, and that's essentially the bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, you go for questions. Chairman Brown?
Certainly.
Chairman Knox, I congratulate you for this bill. It's very consistent with what we put into the budget for the state employees. There are experts in this whole issue of consumer-driven health care who have two contentions. One, and that it could be the salvation of what's been going on with health insurance. And secondly, that this and one other companion, not a companion bill, but a separate bill, are very critical to making this happen. And I'm very encouraged to see the growth, which was just reported in USA Today yesterday, in regard to the whole HSA, HRAs, and we even went one step further for our state employees with a health incentive account. So I think this is an outstanding piece of legislation.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Appreciate that.
Chair recognizes Representative Orrock.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't have my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Later. I was not aware of the subcommittee. It just happened. I was here last night when we were looking at the bill. I'm still catching up with how the changes that were made.
Okay, I think.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman.
Just to point out, I believe it's Section 4 of the bill is where some of the new language was added that attempts to prevent the double dipping concern that was brought up. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Section 4, and it does that by referring to the proper section of the IRS code, that if they take the exemption from off their federal, then it cannot carry over in their adjusted gross.
Actually, I think it's Section 5 that actually cites the federal code there.
Well, it's Section 4 on my bill.
Chairman Brown.
Yeah, I apologize, but I just think this is so critical, and there were a lot of naysayers, and it was going to just be favorable only to healthy people, but 43% of the people, since Congress passed this, who have joined these plans came from the ranks of the uninsured. I mean, I really think we are beginning to truly see what can happen, and this would certainly encourage more people to do it.
Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Dobbs, I didn't have the benefit of the subcommittee discussion, so perhaps you could step me through the rationale for giving the tax deduction both to the individuals who are paying the premiums and the insurers who are selling the policies.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons we're doing that is to encourage more companies to get into the market and to make the product available. The theory being that it will encourage competition, and competition usually brings down the price and cost of products that are sold in the marketplace. And so that's one of the reasons for doing it.
May I follow up, please?
Yes, sir.
Would you not be creating an additional marketplace if you're providing for the purchaser the tax deductibility? Isn't that already creating an additional marketplace?
It is, but if the company sees no incentive to them in making it available, they aren't going to do it. So you can't buy something that's not out there. So this is a way to both make the product available and make it less expensive for the purchaser of the product.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there is a lengthy fiscal note that we didn't have last night and that the subcommittee had for this brief meeting this morning. Are you in a position to summarize the finding of it, or is...
I'll be happy to let the author do that as a bill.
I'm going to try.
Revenue loss seems substantial.
Well, I'm going to ask Alan Hayes of the Department of Insurance to address that issue, because they've looked at this before we had a fiscal note, and we've looked at the fiscal note since we've...
I'm sorry, Chairman Knox, but in our full committee meetings, we don't have testimony from anybody but the members.
All right, well, let me address the best that I can then. I think... Where is that copy of that? First, let me get a hold.
Here.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to refer you to page 4 of the fiscal note. Or, I'm sorry, the last page of the fiscal note, page 5, which is the summary. And if you look at table 4, table 3 and table 4, you'll see that the summary shows you that on a projection of between 15% and 50% growth in the product or the sales of this instrument, you have a couple of scenarios. There's 4 different scenarios from 2007 to 2010. What this shows you, and if you went to the most the least optimistic loss here would be 50%. If you had a product whose launch resulted in a growth rate of 50%, it would be the most successful product in the history of health insurance if you had that kind of a rate increase. So I'm thinking that 15% is a more likely scenario under most circumstances, and so that what you're looking at there is from on the state income tax revenue loss side in table 3 down to table 4, you're looking at something between $7 and $10 million. Our current health insurance costs, expenses, are something in the neighborhood of several billion dollars with a B. So I think based on that estimate, of course, you also have to understand that the cost of Medicaid, Medicare, state health plan, and so on are all going to be growing at the same rate as what's laid out in the scenario here with respect to the lost revenues. Now, this is not an outlay by the state; it's simply money that they don't get. So it's like what we're saying here is this is money we're going to let people keep in their own pockets instead of turning it over to somebody.
I think it'd probably be good at this juncture to point out to the committee, for anybody that doesn't know, and you all probably already know, there's very special tax provisions for insurance corporations at the state level, and it's predicated on what's known as a premium tax. It's not a corporate income tax. So each dollar of premium essentially has what's tantamount to like a sales tax. It's and there's a local component and a state component. It totals, I think, 4.75 total, 225 one and 250 the other, or vice versa. So there's a significant local impact on this bill as well. As I read the fiscal note, going down to our local communities' tax base as well. And I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that it's not a typical income tax scenario. It's a premium tax that we're talking about here. that's very unique in and of itself in our code. I recognize Vice Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To the author bill, I applaud you as well for this, but let me ask you this. I'm concerned, I guess, coming from local government at this late date in affecting the local government's revenue. I certainly see how state's revenue being affected may in fact help us in getting more people off the state aid type health care. Would the author consider an amendment for this year and perhaps come back next year to strike Section 2 of the bill and let them continue to pay premium tax, the 1% to local governments? If the committee goes forward, in other words, we'll write checks here at the state we have to cash, if you will, and waive that premium tax, and then address that so we have time to talk to.
Well, let me say that I would entertain that, but let me tell you what I think my take is on that. Cities and counties basically pass their medical care costs on to the state in the form of either federal or state government, in the form of Medicaid, Medicare, Peach Care, and all those coverages that we have for folks that can't afford insurance. The state, those are state dollars. The counties and the city governments as entities don't pay those. So when we and it occurred, this just simply occurred to me recently when we were looking at law enforcement, for instance. We said we can't hire state troopers anymore like we used to be able to. We've got a 200-person shortage. But Cobb County's not having any problem hiring police officers. The reason for that is Cobb County is spending its money, and I'm not singling out Cobb County, but the reason for that is Cobb County is spending its money on law enforcement, on police officers. And how can they do that? Why can they do that and the state can't pay their people? And I'll suggest to you that it's in large part due to the fact the state's picking up all the costs of every one of their citizens who can't afford to pay for health insurance, and that's being passed along right to the state. So when we look at the cost to the local government of this health care, the local government has very little in the way of government health care costs, and the 1% is sort of a windfall for local government in that the state picks up all those costs. Those people end up on the rolls of the state government, not the
we
county.
are trying to accommodate everybody. Rules convenes in 12 minutes. There are two other bills to be heard. I want to try, if we can, get everybody in a position, if they want to try to vote on this morning, if it's the pleasure of the committee. Are there any other critical questions that you need to know before you're willing to vote on this legislation? Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that's not clear to me in the fiscal note is how much of the proposed revenue loss would be if you split the purchaser and the insurer. What percentage of the revenue loss is borne by? Well, the question I was really trying to get to is how much of the revenue is going to the person who purchases the policy and how much of it is going to the insuring companies?
Well, it's 2.25% is the premium tax that the insurance companies will save if they get to take this, if they don't have to pay that on offering this product.
Absolutely the last question. Briefly.
Thank you. The question comes to me is, has this been studied? Because we heard testimony in the subcommittee.
You want to answer that?
Yes, I'd be glad to answer. It's been studied, and matter of fact, I understand.
I didn't
Let him
finish
answer
my
the question.
Okay, well that's not my question.
Oh, okay.
Sound like that to us.
Last night the testimony was that there are different studies ongoing and already accomplished that have different views on the worth of this policy, and would it not be better to study the larger questions instead of being seen as giving the insurance industry a special tax break?
Just trying to answer that.
Well, Representative Orr, I think that was your testimony last night.
It was Mr. Essex' testimony.
My testimony would be that there are studies going on now. There were studies going on 20 years ago, and there'll be studies going on 30 years from now. We're always studying it, and we should continue to study it so that we always are looking for the best way to be able to solve the problem.
Recognize Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I move we do pass on House Bill 1254 by committee substitute.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anybody wish to propose?
Mr. Chairman, if I could. If this is in order, I'd just like to ask the gentleman, maker of the motion, if he would consider, so that we don't have an impact and can revisit this at a time later, we don't have an impact on local government, would the gentleman consider striking Section 2,
which is county,
which is county and city? And I understand Chairman Knox's concern with that, but just to set some people, I know my chairman's at ease. I'm ill at ease with that. I'm a little as well, and I think it might help some members of the committee if the committee would do that. I don't want to stop the bill, so I would request if we do that the committee agree to waive print. I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct.
Okay, is that a motion?
Well,
motion to amend.
Does it have to be 2 and 3? We could let him take the state if we. I'm more concerned about the local than.
It's in both. Line 11 on page 2.
I should say this has been out there for a while. This bill was filed earlier on in the session. I haven't heard any opposition from any GMA or the ACCG or any of those folks. I think the cost, the amount of premium or revenue loss to them is going to be de minimis.
Mr. Chairman, that was my question of the maker of the motion. I'll leave him to decide how he wants to proceed with that.
Are you withdrawing your motion? Is that what you do? You made your.
So just make an amendment.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. A question about the posture of the committee, Mr. Chairman. Is a motion to amend in order? I would move to amend the bill by striking Section 2 and Section 3 and renumber the other sections accordingly.
We have a proposed amendment and a second. Is there any discussion on the amendment? You wish to explain your amendment?
Well, the impact of it would, that at this point in time, would not extend this impact to county and city governments. And we'd still have the opportunity to look at it later if we wanted to add that at a later point in time. It would get a policy in place that didn't have some unintended impacts at this point.
All in favor of the ladies? Yes, please.
I think that beyond what Chairman Knox talked about, that more and more of our local governments are aided in moving their employee base. They will more than offset this revenue loss by the decrease in their health insurance costs. So I think we're helping them with this bill, even if sections 2 and 3 stay in there. So I encourage my fellow members to vote against this amendment.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there's a misconception here about the role of local government health care.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're ignoring the fact that actually local governments have to contribute tremendously to the indigent care at their local hospitals and so forth. And we've had absolutely no input from local governments on this bill, and it's been on the subcommittee. And while I want to help the gentleman move this bill on out, I do think that we need to take a serious look at the effect it's going to have on local government.
Further discussion on the motion of the amendment, which is to strike in their entirety Section 2 and 3. All in favor of that amendment motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. I'll need a hand count. The ayes. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 to 4. The amendment carries. Those two sections are struck. Are there any further amendments? All right, we have a motion do pass now as amended House Bill 1254 as a committee sub. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Aye. Nay. You've done that. Have we got 2 more bills still?
All right.
Did the chairman say we have 2 more bills? Oh, well, we'll pass those.
I have 2.
See, this bill was a tax cut for the insurance industry. That's what that was. Thank you, Brother Flood, for lifting that up. What else have we got? We've heard that.
Chairman, we have before us two items remaining that are tied together, House Resolution 1339 and House Bill 1323 by Chairman O'Neill. Chairman Royal, the chairman of the subcommittee, had to step away to another engagement. I can report that I was in the subcommittee meetings, and these were reported out of subcommittee with a due pass recommendation to the full committee, and I asked the chairman if he would present the propositions.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this very briefly. This is the residential special tax allocation district legislation that you've read about in just about every newspaper in the state. It's been lawyered all over the state. It's been opined all over the state. It's been changed about 655 times. And anytime I see that much consternation over just allowing the people of the state of Georgia to make a selection that's completely their selection to make by a statewide referendum, I know there must be some fire where all that smoke is. So I bring before the committee the House Bill 1323 and the accompanying 1339 constitutional resolution to let Georgians vote on whether or not we will allow our local governments to put this arrow in their quiver, so to speak, for economic development purposes in the future. I'd remind the committee Disney World is an example of this. Florida had this law, was able to do it. Places like the Villages. We actually have incorporated several consumer protections now into the law based on a suggestion of some of my friends at the Atlanta Constitution, as a matter of fact, because they were able to point out to us some bad things happening in other states where this law was in existence. So we were able to curb some of those. We probably have more disclosure in this than any other state's law. I think we've taken the best of all places. It has been supported by the commissioner folks throughout. It's opposed by the GMA folks. They see it as a obstacle to zoning, and in many cases I'd have to admit that it is. But we have incorporated now into the legislation the service delivery strategy that passed out of this House in 1997 in House Bill 489, where there's been intergovernmental contracts between counties and cities for provision of services. It's been, I think, unfairly characterized as small cities. It's really not that at all. It's more akin to a homeowners association, and I ask the committee's favorable consideration. I'd be glad to yield for any questions.
If I may first, wasn't one of the changes in subcommittee that you actually have to have 100% of the property owners to agree to this?
Yes, sir.
So everybody has to be on the same page. Does the committee have further questions of the author on this proposition?
Thank you. Throughout the language, it uses the phrasing administrative or governing body. What's contemplated there, or what's the difference or distinct? I mean, that's a term of art there for a reason, I'm sure. And I just was.
If you could be more specific where you're referring.
Well, when you talk about the body that's going to be created for the infrastructure development district, that could have elections, terms, qualifications, you call it administrative or governing body. What's the impact of that language?
Administrative or governing body really is just other descriptive words for what's going to be a board of directors. Very similar to a homeowners association. And that board of directors will be in place to govern their own environment. Some of the complaints and some of the abuse of this had to do with the fact that it's very late in a development cycle before the property owner's board takes control of their own board while you're in that period of development where the developer still owns over 50%, in this case 80% of the development. So one of the consumer safeguards that we put in the legislation is that developers are not allowed to let any contracts that are going to bind the board or that community development district beyond the property owners taking over control, and hence the ultimate expense for those contracts. Those were some of the abuses, again, our friends at the Constitution pointed out from other articles in Florida papers. There weren't many. I mean, they've had 30 years of experience and 300 and some odd of these things in existence in Florida, and I saw about 3 places where there were some abuses that, of course, they were expanded to make you think there were thousands, but the truth of the matter is there were about 3 places where some people had had some, in some cases, unfounded complaints. So we put many consumer type protections in it since it began.
Just final question. So what is the problem that exists that this formation seeks to address? What's getting cured? What's broken needs fixing?
An option to infrastructure development that's otherwise maybe not there in certain circumstances, especially in rural Georgia. There are many counties that in rural Georgia that are not wealthy enough to make infrastructure development type investment in their county that might attract a Disney World or attract a large industry or be able to house people. We saw a very similar problem with the Ritz-Carlton that was built on Lake Oconee in Greene County. What you really never heard much about in the media, but was true. I mean, the Ritz-Carlton is certainly a very elegant, high luxury place, but it requires hundreds of employees. And when you enhance the value of the property like around there, they had to find places for these employees to live because they were just going to be pouring into this area. And these folks like me, coming from a meager background, they're not making $200,000 a year to buy those places. They needed reasonable housing. This would have been a great opportunity to develop some of that out way away from cities, and but yet still to where the investment could be made by a developer. So, and again, it's only optional. Every local government has a right to opt in or opt out if the land is in it, and 100% of the property owners that elect to try to do it have to all be in the deal. So it's a personal property rights bill in that sense. It doesn't bring anybody in with a long wave of a movement or anything. It's totally optional. And it won't happen until 2/3 of us vote for it here in this General Assembly, and then 51% of the people vote for it on the ballots, and then each local community has to opt in. And in every contract let to sell land in these things, in conspicuous lettering, everybody's told exactly how much encumbrance is in the property that they're buying. They know the deal going in, and we protect them from their own selves every way I know how in this legislation. And at the end of all of that, it still is just asking the people of Georgia to decide themselves, rather than us deciding for them. I trust them to make the decision more than us, frankly.
Further questions of the committee?
Thank you.
Further questions? We have 2 items before us: House Bill 1323 and House Resolution 1339. Anybody from the committee will wish to make a brief statement on either of those items? If not, the committee's in posture. I would accept a motion first on House Bill 1323. Is there?
Second.
I have a motion and a second on House Bill 1323. Is there any discussion?
Just one final question, and I apologize. I know I'm way behind the curve on the details of this, Mr. Chairman. But this thing that's created, this entity, has taxing power.
Yes.
But if I may, for the chairman, I don't want to speak for the chairman, but it has taxing power, but only if 100% of the property owners on its creation wish to be part of it. There's no other government in Georgia that has to have 100% buy-in before they can levy a tax. Well, the city of Alpharetta, the city of Atlanta, Fulton County doesn't have to have 100% buy-in from their constituents in order to levy fees or taxes. The way this bill is written, all of these people have to opt in. 100% of the property owners have to opt in. So that they have to want to be part of it. Is there further discussion?
So when you say taxing power, it means it has the same powers to tax as a political subdivision?
Only within that development where 100% of the people opt to be involved, or it wouldn't be created in the first place. Yes, ma'am. Further discussion?
Capped based on a millage, and also capped based on infrastructure needs that are designed and agreed to prior by, again, 100% of the folks that are involved in it.
Hearing no further discussion, we have a motion to pass on House Bill 1323. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. We're now in a posture, House Resolution 1339, that basically goes before the voters of Georgia and makes this possible. Is there any question? If there not, what's the pleasure of the committee regards to House Resolution 1339?
Move. Second.
I have a move and a second that House Resolution 1339 do pass. Is there discussion? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. House Resolution moves on to rules with a do pass recommendation.